All right.
Well, you were being Do we have to do introductions again? It's the same people.
Let's get started on the next one right away.
How about, has anyone new entered the room? I don't think so.
Has anyone new? Hello?
3 o'clock, time to start.
Yeah, no one cares about this. Do you have like a
No.
Or we'll just start without.
Just start talking.
Well, since no one else is listening, that's
Let's just figure this out.
You and me. Does anyone know how to whistle?
I do.
You want to give her?
You want to plug your ears first?
It's supposed to be a loud whistle. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Oh, we need Alan here all the time.
It's better. We're going to get started on the lodging and entertainment subgroup. I don't see anyone new here.
Is there anyone new that's entered the room?
Is there anyone new?
Okay.
All right, then we don't need to reintroduce ourselves.
Yeah.
So we'll just skip to the second bit. Michelle, do you want to, or do you want me to?
The history of lodging and
Yeah.
entertainment.
So for those of you who might remember, about a year ago, well, 2 years ago, it doesn't matter. There was legislation that created a new license type for a lodging and entertainment license. The statutory definition of it is pretty clear on the lodging side. I don't think we have any questions regarding that. But for purposes of qualifying or obtaining one of these lodging and entertainment licenses, the primary purpose of your business is supposed to be entertainment. So about a year and a half ago, we started a rulemaking working group just to address lodging and entertainment, to try and define what entertainment was. And at that time, we went through a couple working group hearings. There's copies of the working group minutes from a year and a half ago at the front table if you don't have a copy in front of you. And the reason for the copy is to just memorialize what some of the conversation was at that time about how the working group was thinking about what entertainment is and who should qualify for this license type. So we went through the working group process, had a regulatory and actual rulemaking hearing. And after the hearing, we kind of had some conversations amongst ourselves, because the way in which we postured that draft rule was to actually define a set list of actual business types. Like, for example, bowling alley. And when we were kind of thinking about drafting the rule in that way, we didn't necessarily think it was appropriate to just set a defined list based on who you are as a business per se. But upon reevaluation, we thought it might be more appropriate, so that we're not so exclusive, that we maybe take another crack at this rule so that we're defining kind of the nature of what your entertainment is. So maybe you aren't a bowling alley per se, but you've got a bowling lane, a little bit of laser tag, a little bit of whatever. So, not that you're caught up on technicalities with the regulation and necessarily prohibited from entrance, but you sort of are included by the spirit of what the regulation is. So we scrapped what that rule was, and we want to bring this conversation back to attempt to redefine what the entertainment component is. I think the division still shares a lot of the same concerns and thoughts about what was teased out in the initial lodging and entertainment working group. I think primarily that not everything is entertainment. There should still be some parameters, and there should still be some metes and bounds, so that entertainment isn't a pretext for someone just getting a liquor license. That there still must be some intended boundaries, and that it is still the intended purpose of your business is to be entertainment, not to just buy an Xbox and put it in the corner and really be serving as a tavern or some other type of more appropriate license. So I guess that's just kind of where we're at this point. Is we still, obviously want to honor the spirit of the statute, which says it has to be your primary purpose is to be entertainment, but I guess we just want to open it for conversation, perhaps, to and maybe Michelle and Alan have some more comments about on just teeing this up that I'm not thinking of, but how the division would sort of like to move forward with attempting to define this, because I know it's been very complicated and very difficult, and we're trying our hardest to address everyone's concern and to get stuff out there so the municipal clerks and that our clerks know what's what and everyone's on the same page when it comes to who's eligible for this and who's not. So I don't know, Michelle or Alan, is there anything you want to add on?
Well, because I think what the working group was unable to fully agree upon was the different types of licenses, and that's where I think we need to take a look at the most. And that is, how are we going to address the coffee shops, the nail and hair salons, barber shops, tattoo shops, karaoke bar, farm to dinner, and then we had butterfly pavilion or botanical gardens. So, and then any other license type that you would feel would fit in this or not fit, and how we address that in our rules so that it's clear. Because one of the issues that the licensing specialists are having is they're getting a lot of these from multitude of areas within the state, and how do they tell someone in Denver or someone out in Grand Junction what the difference is and why we aren't issuing that type of license. So there's still a lot of confusion about what is entertainment.
I guess I would ask is, like, I can see the argument for a spa, I can't see the argument for a tattoo parlor. That, not to mention, I don't have any obviously, but if you go in, they say if you're visibly intoxicated, we're not going to serve you. So is that even a safe place to
And I
serve
would
alcohol?
say that I'm not even certain I see the entertainment value in a spa. Entertainment being an event, performance, or activity designed to entertain others.
So there's there's nail salons and there's actual spas. Like there's the corner nail salon and there's like the Woodhouse spa. They're two very different things. So
I agree with
is
that.
there a distinction there?
It reminds me of the sandwich argument, right? You know, I mean, that's sort of,
Difference between a sandwich and a pizza. Yeah.
right, or a hot dog, or
Right.
Well, and is there a
chicken
difference
wing.
between your charging versus you're giving it away? Because salons will just give it away versus, I'm assuming Butterfly Pavilion or something else would charge you for it rather than just hand you a glass when you walk in.
Yeah, so the division would view that as a sale, even if it was complimentary, just
Oh.
because it is,
Because it's a sale of a haircut, and
You're
then
paying for
you're
service.
adding.
there's still the overhead.
Then we wanna be sure we keep it.
Yeah, 'cause I do like
hey,
that.
this is not, this is not personal motivation here.
This is not selfish at all.
Andrew,
Sorry, can you touch on the core, like, what is the core problem of what this license is supposed to solve?
that's a good question.
It's a
The
tavern
exact same
license.
thing it cost.
Yes, that's exactly it.
That's a good answer.
So initially, it was supposed to resolve the issues with the tavern license for the sale by a drink, and so it was creating a new license type that would fit for all these types of businesses that then could get a license. It also took out on the lodging, it took out that food requirement for the kitchen and gave the lodging facility the ability to have this license without having to get a full kitchen. But there are some, on the lodging, none of the drinks can go to the rooms. It has to stay within that common area. So that is one of the differences between the H&R license to the lodging and entertainment. But the difficulty where we're running into now is what's entertainment, because each jurisdiction county is coming up with their different thoughts on what does that mean. Does that mean that entertainment is putting up a television and it's got sports on it, so now is that entertainment? Or is it entertainment that I go to my spa? Or is it entertainment I get my nails painted? And that's the question.
The majority of bars have TVs behind the bar,
Mhm.
and they're tavern licenses or
Correct.
hotel restaurant
restaurant.
But in that scenario, their primary purpose is to sell alcohol.
Right.
I think a business, by simply putting a TV up in there, does not fundamentally change the business to the point that now their
They're
primary
entertaining.
purpose is entertainment.
That's exactly right.
Right.
They're just
So,
providing it as
yes.
part of a service they're also providing.
Yes, and I'll concede to the spa thing, but looking at a couple of the ones that we've got here, like coffee shops, karaoke bars, and farm to dinner, if the farm to dinner is doing it consistently, it's not a one-off, how are they not getting an H&R license?
Right.
Yeah.
A karaoke bar, I would say,
Is a bar.
could probably make a reasonable argument to say their primary purpose is the sale
Drink.
of alcohol, cause they're not charging you to do karaoke, they're charging you to drink there while you're doing karaoke, except for I guess some places that'll give you a room. And in coffee shops, again, anything they sell that is consumable that's not alcohol would qualify as food, so I think they could get an H&R there as well.
So the one, if you don't mind me chiming in.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One comment I would make is that it's the difficulty in listing the kinds of places that might
Right.
qualify versus the kinds of activities that would qualify as entertainment is something we're struggling with, because we're gonna miss one. That
Mhm.
that really is entertainment that we didn't think to list.
And that's why it changed constantly. I mean, 10 years ago, if we were putting this list together, we had escape rooms up in there.
Right.
Right.
Right, so we're,
That's
I think we're hoping to come up with a way to define it that isn't based on a list of businesses
So
or
are we looking
models.
for a definition of entertainment?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I mean, then you're back into the sandwich argument, right?
Correct.
And this is,
I mean,
this
that's the
is-
problem.
Right.
That was the fundamental argument we tried, or fundamental thing we tried to figure out 2 years ago,
Mhm.
or whenever the hell we started this. And realized we couldn't come up with a definition of entertainment, which is why we tried to go down the route of a list of some
Mhm.
kind, keeping it as vague as possible in some people's minds, not some people I
What
work
if you,
for.
what if you did it like you're proposing, Ellen, but then you made it more of an exclusionary definition? So where you say almost like what you, Michelle and Nick were just saying, like, the mere fact that you put up a TV in your establishment where you provide the service of cutting hair does not make you an entertainment establishment. Right? Like, you kind of go at it the opposite direction. Instead
Yeah,
of
say more
trying,
what it isn't as opposed to what it is.
I think it might be easier.
Yeah.
So I think what you might be saying there is that what entertainment is not is, one, it's not just putting a TV up, but to pick on barbershops, it's not a service
Mhm.
versus where a spa
Provides an experience.
provides.
I don't know, I mean, that could,
Provides,
right.
provides.
I love
Like,
this
it's
imagery.
slippery,
It
right?
It does provide an
yeah.
experience.
Provides I'm at a loss of words, but I
I think
think
the spa
we
and
can get
barbershop one's
there.
hard, but you're exactly right. You're going down the right path, I think, of simply service-based businesses where you're paying to have something, your haircut, your nails painted, a set service. Just because they throw a TV up, that doesn't make them an entertainment establishment.
Versus a spa that is.
That one I think
Something.
you wait on, because that one's a tough distinction, but I think it gets you with most of the rest of what's on this list. With the definition you read and then what's on here. And then you don't run afoul of what Alan was saying, which is you miss something in trying to give examples of what entertainment is, which is where we got hung up last go around.
Well, and we talked about after this got sorted, we would talk about the complimentary license. I know Patrick
Mhm.
mentioned that a couple
Yeah.
years ago too. I know
Yeah.
we're not finished with this yet, so we haven't been able
Yeah.
to broach that issue, but would that potentially help to iron out what it is and what it isn't?
Well, what do you foresee with a complimentary license? Like, what would that look like, and who would be the intended types of businesses who would be licensed by that?
That's what's tough, cause when you say even if it's still built into the price of whatever,
Yeah,
then
it's
it's
still
not
considered a
technically
sale.
complimentary anymore, so
Yeah.
what is complimentary?
Recouping the cost would be, but then we're looking at you guys going into people's books to figure out how much the cost was and how much price went up because of it,
Yeah.
which,
More challenging going forward.
you wanna do that,
Mhm.
anyone?
No.
No.
Will there be tasting and sampling? or is it-
With licensing a nail salon or a barber shop or something like that. I mean, based on my conversations with Patrick, the reason behind this license was because we were issuing licenses to businesses whose primary purpose was not the sale of alcohol, which is what a tavern is. So this license was created for every other business who doesn't meet that definition. So why can't we just leave it as that and say, lodging and entertainment license is available to businesses whose primary purpose is not the sale of alcohol?
Because the statute doesn't allow that.
Because I
don't
think
see where it doesn't allow
well,
it.
Yeah, all you have to do is read the definition of the statute.
It says
I think
by
it's
lodging and
specific-
entertainment.
yeah,
You don't have
lodging
to
and
define
entertainment. I think the conversation around this license back when we were contemplating the bill before it got introduced and passed was to make it so it wasn't simply a license for anyone who couldn't qualify for a tavern, which is why it's a lodging and entertainment license instead of a non-tavern
Yeah,
liquor license.
but what's entertainment to me is not
Right.
necessarily entertainment.
Right,
Yeah.
that
It's
there
go-
lies
You know,
the
going to the
problem.
salon or to the blow dry
Right.
bar
Mhm.
is entertainment for the, you know, little old lady who that's her social service for that weekend.
And I think the concern more from an overarching picture is if you kind of allow, and again, this is just my reiterating what I've heard, is that the concern with leaving it into the eye of the beholder is that you're then blowing it out to probably more than what this license was intended to do, and that you are you might be, and again, I don't have stake in the game. I mean, it's probably the hotel and restaurants and taverns that have stake in the game
But that's
against
needs
this
and desires.
competition.
If that meets the needs and desires of the neighborhood, and you go to a public hearing and prove that, then that's what that neighborhood has deemed is entertainment and viable for beer service or wine service or whatever.
Do you create I think probably the hard thing with that argument might be is then you kind of got a lack of parity to a certain extent, right? Like if my neighborhood is okay with the barber shops selling liquor, but then across the street in that neighborhood they're not okay with barber shops selling liquor, are we then venturing into territory that might be beyond our?
Well, it's the same conversation I have to have with clients now when they're going for a tavern license or a retail liquor store license. This neighborhood may be okay with 5 liquor stores on a block, that one's not.
Right, but correct me if I'm wrong, and the point of the needs and desires hearing is determine if the neighborhood needs and or desires another liquor licensed establishment to be selling liquor, whether it's on or off premise. The point of that hearing is not to determine what entertainment is.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And I think you gotta go back to what Nick was saying and you guys were saying too, in the sense of what was the real intent? I mean, when we were all working on this, the intent was not a catch-all post-prohibition workaround to give anybody who wouldn't other qualify for a liquor license, right?
They can already get beer and wine if they want.
Yeah,
Right,
Correct.
exactly.
there's something available.
Yeah.
So I think it just sort of depends on what your intent is with that. But I think, to Michelle's point, trying to expect every municipality to define independently what entertainment is just a hornet's nest for
Yeah,
you
that's
guys.
just
I mean, I just think
problems.
there's
Why-
no way the division, we're working on stuff right now under value of labor to tighten stuff down to give you better, clearer stuff. Why would you open yourself up to something that's gonna just
And like-
cause the next problem down the road?
Why would a coffee shop need one of these? Cause
Well,
correct
and
me if
that's
I'm
kind
wrong,
of what I was getting
what
to.
license does, I don't know if they do it anymore, but since Starbucks is for a time sold,
Did the
which
beer
one
and
do
wine?
They had a
I
beer
think
and
they had
wine.
beer and
Yeah.
wine.
They still do it.
Some do,
Yeah,
some
so,
They
I mean, they already have an avenue, so.
And I think, and I don't remember exactly, this was a while ago, but I think the conversation around a coffee shop was those that might have open mic
I was gonna say, like,
or
live
those
entertainment.
live entertainment, kind of in a similar vein of a karaoke bar or
But as the
whatever.
primary purpose of their business, that seems.
Oh, and I'm not,
right.
Yeah.
Again, and
wasn't my
again,
idea, yeah.
doesn't a beer and wine
Yeah.
license
Twice a
cover
week.
that?
Yeah.
Jake, wouldn't a
What-
beer and wine license cover that anyway, if that's what they're?
I don't know. I don't
They're
s-
wanting spirits.
Yeah.
That's
Oh.
where they're,
Spirits.
that's
They want
where they're
spirits. Okay.
running into
So no,
short
it doesn't
for
cover
some.
it.
That is
Yeah.
the primary.
So, where we're at right now is maybe looking at what it is not, and what it is not is a service. And I think we can tease that out and maybe get there. What is, aside from maybe what's on this list, I think, are there any other So when I look at this list, it seems like there's, maybe broad categories, right? Some of these are sporting, where you've got like a golf course, an arcade, a pool hall. Some of them are kind of educational, where you've got cooking school or arts and crafts classes. Are there any types of other broad categories or things that we're maybe not thinking of around that? Yes, sir. Would they be good under the public transportation license? They might I think they would just qualify under that normally and probably have their own.
This isn't necessarily a category, and this could be a terrible idea. Thinking about, if you look at all of these, kind of like the general window of time that you would spend at these, like a movie, 2 to 3 hours, amusement parks, arcades, pool halls, theaters, whatever. Like a barber shop, typically you're in and out within 30 minutes to an hour, your nails done really quick, 45 minutes maybe, depending on what you're doing. Does that come into play at all?
I think that's gonna be subjective, because I know people that can spend a day and a half in an art gallery, and you can put me in a modern art museum and I'm out in 5 minutes.
Amen.
Yeah, me too. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that becomes very subjective. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's something to it, because as Jake, you were reading through the list, I was thinking, and I don't know how you define this either, but what you're really talking about is you're talking about a venue, right? Like you're talking about
Yeah.
somewhere you go to really participate in something for a period of time.
Or witness.
Or,
something.
or watch something but I don't know how I think that's why coming at it the other way may still be easier. But I was sitting here thinking that as you were saying that, Stephanie,
Yeah.
in terms of,
Just-
it's
yeah.
inherently it's for a longer period of time,
Mhm.
but I don't know how you.
Like you said, it's more of an experience as opposed to a
Mhm.
service.
Is this defined in any other state? Is there any other state that does, have you looked?
So we did look at Washington State, because they do have a complimentary beverage license that they give to their spas, but you have to have, they have 5 different things listed, and you have to have at least 3 of those. So they have hair care, skin care, nail care, body care, which includes massage, wraps, and waxing. And then you have to have day spa is a separate service, so you have to have at least 3 of those categories to get this complimentary license. So we were trying to think about if we
Maybe
did
that's
do the
how you
spa,
make the distinction.
we could possibly maybe limit it down to you have to have these 3 services or 2 services to get such a license.
A minimum of, that may be your distinction on, that it's not anything that's service-based. Those businesses aren't eligible, with the exception of places that provide this list of services, a minimum of 4 or more or something, which gets you from the barber shop to the spa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That may
And
do
then
it.
everybody else would have to get a tavern license if they didn't fit into that? Is that
Beer and wine.
what happens to the other?
Well,
can
this
do
is
it
just
more.
limited to the spa piece, so we don't have anything that's really overall
Catches the other
entertainment.
parts, right.
Well, it's still entertainment, because it's still any business that is not service-based, right? You still pick up the bowling alleys, the movie theaters,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We did look at Texas as well. Texas has a statute on defining entertainment. Their statute, though, is kind of the direction that we were initially headed, where they were defining the actual bowling alley and things of that nature a little bit more explicitly, which, so for what it's worth, the stuff we were looking at was kind of the direction we were trying to head, so.
How did they deal with their list if they missed something?
That's
didn't?
the problem, it was set by statute and there was only a handful of things, like, I think they had, and of course, every state's different, I think they had like a car racing track even in there, so like, I don't know, Bandamere or whatever, so.
Like the
We got
go-kart,
racetracks.
like the
Go-kart,
unserved.
yeah,
As long as
so
you're
that's how Texas did it,
observer.
of course, and
Yeah.
again, they would be strictly
Participate.
limited
Here's
by
some
that.
drinks,
Other
now
rules to
drive
make
the
sure
car.
they're not drinking.
Exactly. Here's some drinks and a tattoo.
Now go get in a
Yeah.
fast car.
Andrew.
Just to give more information on the event venue part of this too, is I work with probably hundreds of event centers all over the state of Colorado. And the reason that most of them do not desire to get liquor licenses is because if you take, for example, example, Butterfly Pavilion, they've got a staff of maybe like 4 or 5 people, right?
Mm.
So if you then have them, have to manage something like a liquor license, it makes it very, very difficult for them to achieve the same level of safety that, for example, another company could be able to provide. Now, Botanical Gardens would be an example of, they're big enough to probably warrant something like this to happen, but I think the definition of, in the event venue site might be a problem area. For that reason, because they're just simply not big enough to be able to
Yeah.
self-facilitate this. So then they hired, like, for example, a lot of them work with my bartending company to be able to manage their venue. There's a lot of venues that have liquor licenses. My bartending company will be the bartenders at most of their events because they don't have the capability to manage their own license type, which is why I think which is why I frankly, I don't really agree with this license type for that scenario. But
Well, it's a voluntary license. If they don't
yeah,
have
they don't
the
have
staff
to
to do
have
it, they don't have to get it.
exactly, yeah.
So they could then continue to use you
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whoever they want to, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
This license also gives them the right to buy from a wholesaler as well as a retailer with that $2,000.
I think,
Require them.
yeah, that's correct. I think that $2,000 cap would still apply
Yes, it does.
would still apply to this
To the nail
license.
company, if you call up a wholesaler and say, I want a box of wine, 12-pack of beer, it doesn't seem like they're gonna run a truck out there where they can go over to a liquor store and buy that. They probably wouldn't, at retail price, they probably wouldn't spend over $2,000 a year if they were a smaller venue.
And that's a lot of the reason
Yeah.
why they don't get liquor licenses too. They're not big enough to be able to get these minimum order levels at wholesalers.
Yeah, so you
Yeah,
have a registered
and-
license that doesn't use a wholesaler because they can get away with the 2,000 a year.
That's true too.
Yeah. I mean,
What if you required them?
what's that?
What if you somehow, that could be another sort of barrier to entry, right? Is somehow make it so that, cause the businesses we're really talking about, the legitimate, and I'm not meaning to say a nail salon's illegitimate, but I mean, in this discussion, the ones you really want inside of that are gonna have a volume of purchases enough annually that
They're gonna go over that.
they're gonna have to buy from a wholesaler. So maybe you explore something in that realm of, you know, that they,
Who's going to legitimately use and apply the license as opposed to just a beer or two here and there?
do you see what I'm saying, where they would go to Jim's place and just use up to their 2,000 cap?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Cause when you're talking bowling alleys, movie theaters, spas.
Right, yeah, they would still be subject to the investigation, you know, if they had.
Sure,
to,
but you
yeah.
could put something in rule that says that in order to qualify for it, that you have to have at least one source from wholesale. I mean, are we talking about any volume of license that isn't gonna have to anyway, of what you guys are concerned about? They're gonna have to buy
I
from
don't-
wholesale anyway, cause they're gonna go over the amount.
I don't know, because if they're only buying, I mean, I don't
I'm
know.
just thinking about the types of businesses we
Yeah.
were talking about, it
No,
seems like their volumes are
My
gonna be
paranoia
probably.
kinda kicks in a little bit on that one.
I also.
I get it,
would-
I'm just trying to think of
yeah.
another way to get at the
Yeah.
definition.
Right.
Do we, and I'm just thinking out loud, would that be kind of a just barrier to entry for someone who's maybe just testing it a little bit? Like they might just be a small scale
Laser tag place.
spa out in Sterling that,
Mhm.
you know,
It's
if
true, 'cause
if
what-
they
depending
were
where you are.
Yeah,
if
that's
they
true.
were if they were somehow prohibited by, you know, just because their scale is different
Yeah,
than
the
it would be
population's less.
in Denver, they might, if we cap, I guess that would just be
No,
my
that's a
only
good point.
concern
I
is
hadn't
that
thought
if
about
we,
that.
if we approached it from that angle, then we're kind of,
I was just trying to think of
cutting-
another
yeah.
way to bite the apple.
Oh, do you have a thought on
You're
that?
right.
I agree.
No, I think that's right.
So.
We go back to selling things in liquor stores, they have to come here and argue as to whether or not, never mind.
So what other things is, just because we have plenty of time and I don't want to use all 2 hours just for the sake of it, going back to the things that entertainment is not. Stephanie, earlier you called out tattoo shops. Is there something and obviously generally they have a policy that when you walk in you can't be intoxicated or whatnot, but is there something about the nature of a tattoo shop or similarly situated businesses that we want to try and bar?
Well, I think that's a service again.
Yeah, I think it's really
Getting someone to
simply
write on
under your
the-
umbrella of services,
Yeah, I think that would
piercings,
All follow
tattoos,
Yeah.
as a service.
haircuts.
Even though you can be in there for hours on end, depending on.
Is part of it whether it's discretionary, whether you're offering the glass of wine or not? Let's say you're going into Tory Burch, they don't give everybody a glass of champagne.
They
Might
offer
give you
it.
a glass of champagne if you've been shopping there for a long time, or they might not. It's not something that's just available to every person who walks in the room, where like an arcade, you probably have a menu of options of what you can pick from. To me, that's a different sort of
Yeah.
thing, the discretion of the owner. Art gallery is sort of the same way, they don't give it to everybody, they give it to some people.
I don't think this takes that away, does it? Them just being licensed, they still have the ability to make a business decision
Yeah.
on how and who they offer it to.
Right.
Well, does it? If I'm walking into a bar, can the bartender determine whether or not they're gonna give me a drink simply because I've been there for 2 minutes or 3 hours?
Sure. You're still in America.
And in a-
Yeah.
They have the right to refuse service to anybody.
But that's,
And an
but
amusement
that's a
park.
bar, that's a tavern or
That's true.
restaurant.
I mean, and
Well,
that's
how about
that's a
the
place that
amusement
their
park, right?
primary
You have a
business
line
is
of
that.
people
Right.
They make their
sporting
primary
events
living
Right.
off of that.
Versus
Yeah.
shoe shopping, you may or may not.
I mean, I guess I'm just saying, I get what you're saying, I just don't think that's our problem to solve, I
You're
think that's a
right.
business
You're right.
decision.
Yeah.
You're right.
I think the problem
Let's
is,
not mess with
there are
that.
things that are fun that
Listen, I
aren't,
don't
that aren't
wanna
really
fuck that up.
entertainment,
No,
like
it's not.
shopping for shoes, that might be fun, but is that really entertainment?
Exactly.
Yes.
Getting-
You
I
had
mean,
to-
that
you had
much
to know
money.
at least
I
one or
need a
two
glass
of
of
them.
I mean, shopping for products, and buying services, I guess that may be one way we can draw lines, but.
Shopping for products or
Retail.
services.
Mm-hmm.
But can't retailers get a beer and wine license if they?
Yeah, but your rule would be specific to this category, right?
Right.
Yeah,
So
and
you
I don't
could-
think Tory Burch technically.
What's Tory Burch?
Yeah, I think
It's a
that-
I don't wanna mess it up.
Let's not mess it up.
Shoes.
She's like,
It's this place in Wyoming,
From now on.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, I saw it one time in Arizona.
Yeah.
It's my inside voice that escaped.
It's not here.
Alright.
But you know, if you go to high-end establishments, sometimes they may offer you something, sometimes they may not.
Right.
Just
In
like
other states.
Well, and
a
they do that
salon, they don't give
by
everybody
wedding
a
dresses.
license,
or-
or I'm gonna be sitting there.
It never happens in Colorado, but in other states I've heard it happens.
Yeah.
Yes, other states.
A lot of, there's 49 other states that have it, it's fine.
Well.
Sorry, I
Thoughts?
took us down a rabbit hole.
You gotta be a little careful about, I was just sitting here, you may not have even thought in the same vein, but I was kind of drafting language in my head and I was thinking, oh, making purchases at retail, and I thought, that doesn't work. So you gotta be a little careful when we're saying like the retail thing, I think you could build it in the sense of kind of the spirit of what we're talking about for the law, but if you're at a bowling alley, you're still making a purchase at retail. Right, if you're renting shoes or and at a movie, you're still making
Yeah,
a.
but
You're not buying
a
goods.
product, yeah.
You're not buying goods, agreed. But you may
could-
be if
you
they
could
have a
buy
bowling
goods.
shop.
Yeah, you could buy.
You may be buying a bowling ball or
Sure,
a shirt.
but their
Yeah.
primary business is to sell, you can use our bowling lane for an hour,
Right.
right? It's
Right.
not to sell an occasional pair of shoes.
Like a gift shop or whatever.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed. Because that takes care of, you're right, because if you have a gift shop on a premise, that's still not their primary purpose.
Yeah.
Their primary purpose is to provide whatever experience you're there for. So you could do something with
Yeah.
retail, a purchase at retail. So it's the primary scope of the business is to make purchases at retail.
And we're still only talking about this license, so they would be able to get beer and wine or anything else that they might apply for.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So are we kind of all in agreement that it's not service-based?
I think so.
Agreement
think-
one.
So
Yeah,
it's
that's-
not service-based?
Sounds like it. I
Yeah.
haven't heard anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, who objects to that?
I guess spas is the one area where, yeah, it's services, but it's more of an experience.
Again,
So
you
many
got that
services,
experience
it's an
thing.
experience.
But I think that's how you made, because I said don't try to, because that in the barbershop thing gets sticky, but I like what Michelle brought up about Washington. You know, that you carve that out and you say you have to provide a certain number of something on this list to be considered.
What about the places that they're, you know, the quick places, manicures, pedicures, they offer like, you know, limited waxing, but they don't do massages, they don't do like facials or.
That's why I'd make it.
Yeah, so the
I'd make it
list-
more than
And I
two of
think
all
that-
that
I
list.
think that's
Because all of a
where
sudden you're
we're
gonna
at.
have all the Chinese
Okay.
massage parlors, yeah.
What
Yeah,
about,
that's what I'm.
what
Sorry.
about,
Something
just
else.
for
Like,
other
what's the
things that,
PC way to say this?
other things that entertainment is not, what about dangerous places, like
Gun ranges?
gun ranges?
Right, shooting
and-
range.
That's where you need a lot of alcohol.
Doesn't the
There's
criminal
one-
code take care of?
And,
No, there
uh,
is one in the Springs that has a liquor license.
Oh,
And,
interesting.
Well, but you don't drink before you shoot, you might go have a drink afterwards.
Yeah, the way
I
they've
mean,
got it
it's a
set up is
club.
they
Yeah,
scan your
yeah,
ID
'cause
so
they're clubs.
It's a
they
club,
can.
so, you know, it's like a hunting club, you go
That's
to,
true.
you go out and you shoot your skeet or whatever, and then you go in and you have a cocktail.
And again, it's a business decision, right? So if they don't police that well, they better have good insurance.
I mean,
Yeah.
I know enough people to
Capital,
consider that
yeah.
entertainment.
Because I think this was way back towards the beginning. So, usually when legislation or something like this comes up, something happened. What caused this to come forward? What happened? What problem came up that somebody was trying to fix? Can I ask?
Yeah, and that was, quite honestly, that was before my time.
This
But it's,
has
but
been
it's,
going on a
but
long
it's-
time.
I know, I was
Decisions, the
there
tab-
when it
Yeah,
started.
I would trust, yeah, and,
I think the museum
Knickers-
Walk discussion, it was I thought it was
Well,
too.
it was that,
Do you wanna-
so when this conversation got brought up, I was involved in the conversation with LED around the beginning of the bill. And it was because the tavern license was being given out to places that didn't have the primary purpose of selling alcohol. And it originally started, I mean, Pete Mearsman tells me the original conversation about expanding the tavern license started with bowling alleys. Because the primary purpose of the bowling alley isn't the sale of alcohol, but they were being given a tavern license, and it was just kind of agreed upon, and then that loosening of the definition expanded into a lot of other things, and it was brought up a couple years ago, that the license was just being given out to so many different things that didn't have the primary purpose of being alcohol. Like one was one of our members up in Greeley who manages a municipal golf course. He's the third party deal, whatever. And
Management
he's got the
company.
liquor license for that municipal golf course. Well, the primary purpose of the golf course isn't the sale of alcohol, it's golf. And up there it was taken away momentarily and then given right back. And that's kind of when the conversation started again. So that's when they came up with this license, or a group of people came up with this license to determine how to catch some of those licenses that were getting taverns, but necessarily didn't fall under a tavern. And it seemed to be a lot of places that were like executive lodging locations or places that provided some form of entertainment. So that's where the name came from. If I remember correctly. Correct me if I got any of that wrong.
Sounds right to me.
And I think the one who was primarily using it, not the way it was intended were galleries and nail salons.
Yeah.
You mean tavern licenses? They were using tavern licenses that way?
That was the first place I had the discussion at the Capitol.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then with the tastings license, the tastings too, that was also part of it. Cause they were cross-pollinated basically.
But that was long before even the conversation of the lodging and entertainment came up. That was around the time of the bowling alley controversy. I'm gonna use that from now on.
It's an original
Bowling
sentence.
I'm gonna use
speaks of
that from
controversy.
now on. The great bowling alley controversy.
So, it seems like we kind of just maybe at a impasse for today. I don't know if we, not an impasse, but I think
I
we've
think
got a
you-
few ideas where if we
We
come
need
to
some
the
progress.
next,
We need to put something on
if we
paper
come to
and
the
talk about
next, yeah, if we come to the next meeting with a draft
Something
of
written.
what we've got, that might
Do you, I
help
guess
the
my question
conversation.
would be, since you say you feel like maybe that wasn't.
Not an
choice of word you
impasse,
meant,
but,
do you guys feel like you've been given some tools from the working group to put you to the next step of like putting pen to paper
And we've,
and actually being able to
we've got some,
put some meat on the bones?
we've got some thoughts about the direction we wanna head, and I think we've explored some of those here, and I would say it's largely consistent. But of course, we wanted to have a conversation before we
Cool.
just threw it out there
So
and
then
said,
leave a
this is what it's
conversation.
gonna be. I think we wanted to have the conversation and make sure we weren't, way out in left field compared to the rest of you before we, introduced at least just a draft red line of it. But I think we're,
Are there
And I
any
shouldn't-
other
I
things
should-
on your list that we didn't touch on with what we were talking about, like with retail and service and that
No.
you've been
No,
losing
I-
sleep
that's not the reason
That's
I
not the
lose
reason.
sleep.
Please
But,
don't let that be the reason.
I've got a baby.
Yeah.
So no, I think those were the big things that we've been circling as well, as how to address services, yet accommodate those types of establishments that are not really a service but are more of a spa experience. How do we address retail? How do we address dangerous places? And but again, be sort of inclusive, and also agree that putting a TV behind a bar, we all agree that there's still parameters that come along with this license. This isn't a pretext for everyone getting a liquor license.
Did we come up with an answer on the dangerous?
No.
I just said have good insurance.
Yeah.
And part of the concern is so you have those places that throwing darts, well, is that dangerous? And then
Most of
other.
those are hotel restaurants.
Right.
Or
Yeah, or a
taverns.
tavern.
Yeah.
Right.
And getting hit by a dart and getting hit by a
Right.
straight bullet's a little different.
Again, you probably should just have good insurance. I
Yeah.
mean, a pool ball's no different, right? You get hit by a pool ball or cue.
Yeah.
So
If someone throws one across the
Yeah.
room.
But deadly weapons, I would think, would be
Yeah.
different than,
But if you guys have already
Well, it's
licensed
kind
one
of
down in the
different
Springs as
category.
it's a club.
Yeah.
Well, Joan's right, yeah, if it's a
If
club.
it's a club that
versus-
has like a clubhouse, it
Well,
has
that's
like
what
an
I was
area where
thinking,
you're
something like that.
I bet you we haven't licensed the range itself.
Exactly.
Well,
And that's where I
Right.
think people are
Right.
wanting to,
But you
and
have to have
so,
it.
They want to license a range.
yeah, or say, an axe throwing business. I want to.
Just went to one of those.
Oddly, I've been to an Ashland business and they did have booze there. And I
They
thought-
did it the one in
So-
Vegas too,
so
but it
how-
was Vegas.
what could go wrong?
What do you do with
This
that?
last one is what?
It was Vegas.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's a good answer.
Oh, we can ask them.
They have that here.
Anything that goes with here, hold my beer.
yeah.
They have
So
that.
are we gonna have to
Are-
try to
so
find
they're gonna wanna
dangerous
license
places, or now we're gonna say,
That's the organ.
I think we'll
But Nick, I
gun
think
ranges.
Michelle's onto something. You don't license the range portion of it, right? Like that's one alternative. If
That's
they
true, they
have,
can't take it to the range with them.
right, or to the area
But-
where you're throwing axes
Well,
or hatchets or whatever.
but in that case, the part of the business that someone who would go there and think is entertainment would be the range.
Right,
Right.
So now you're not licensing the part of the business that would have been entertainment.
but do you really want
So
to?
you make them drink it really fast.
Of course you
before they
don't
go
want
over
to, but then that
Yep.
doesn't mean they qualify for the license.
For the
Oh,
entertainment
yeah,
license.
good point.
Well,
Good
That's a
point.
good point.
That's a very good point. That may be you're out without having to say dangerous
I
things.
guess it's interesting that there's not any other states except for 2 to pick from, because everybody else has these same things also. So what are they doing? They're all taverns there?
They
What are
probably
they in
don't put
other states?
restrictions on the license.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They,
why
they
did we do
probably
this
have
again?
some kind of license that they can.
Qualifies as.
Yeah.
It's just not called entertainment, it's called something different. Maybe we should call it something different.
Population.
Oh, yeah. Lots of them.
I was just at one. Not here, but
A licensed gun range or a state?
Wisconsin.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Nevada,
That makes sense,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
you're right, yeah.
Arizona, Texas.
I wouldn't be
They all
surprised.
have them, yeah.
So, yep. And I think that's kind of that's our overarching concern as well.
But I think Nick's right. I think if you say we inherently, because of the nature of what you're doing on the range, would not issue that as part of the licensed premises, then whatever the rest of the premises is no longer an entertainment venue.
So technically, they could get a tavern license at that point.
Right.
Unless they sell 51% in ammo and gun parts, then they wouldn't be primarily a liquor
Right.
establishment.
Right.
How would the control of that work?
Yeah.
That's why I say I think you just,
Like if
you
you
can have a policy.
if
that you
you've
don't
got, how do you, yeah,
license
I'm
range,
just
like-
concerned about how you control that and how the staff at the establishment would actually control.
That
you can
alcohol
have
control
your-
plan goes to a different level.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Double red lines on that one.
And I think, to your point, not to interrupt, I think we share the same concerns just about public safety and how we address those while also being fair. It's something we've been wrestling with and kicking around this whole time, since this working group a year and a half ago. I mean, even prior to that, how do we address these? And year and a half later, we still don't have a great answer. Andrew, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it might sound like there's maybe just a few specific instances that led to the need for this license type. So maybe in thinking about how to address this, maybe just citing those specific examples might be a better way. It's basically saying you can do these specific things that we found problems with, and then adding to it as more come on, rather than making a general overall rule for what entertainment is.
The thing that I remember going back to it, I don't think it was just a few specific activities, businesses, or times that they strayed out of the primary purpose of selling alcohol and gave them a tavern license. I think it was because it's been going on since bowling alleys were the bowling alley controversy.
Yes.
And it's just been expanded into different things ever since. That I remember clerks came arguing, well, who do we give these to now, since we've been giving them to all these other people? If I make an argument and say your business isn't primary, the primary purpose isn't selling alcohol, but I give it to these people, it's definitely not theirs either.
Yeah.
Now they're misapplying it again. So during that conversation, I don't think it was just a few scenarios.
Okay.
Did you mean the Great Bowling Alley controversy?
Yes, the Great Bowling Alley controversy. Let's just pick a date, 1980 something.
Right.
Great year.
Well, I think for next time, we'll have something in draft form to present, and then we'll just circle that, and we'll carve that up, and then we'll just go from there. Again, my goal is to have drafts issued. We'll try and distribute them through the email list. Try and get them to you a week before the actual meeting on the 16th. Obviously, the 4th of July holiday is in there, and with people coming and going who need to look at this stuff, that might get complicated. But just appreciate your patience as we're all doing our best. So, if you have anything before then, please just send them in, or you know where to find us. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect.